I do have some questions, but first of all, let's acknowledge that energy consumption in Canada is rising, like it is everywhere in the world, and technology consumption is a large part of that. If we're going to have a technological economy going forward, we're going to have to produce more energy because technology consumes more energy as we continue to deploy more of it. But really, there's three sources of energy in Canada. There's electricity, which is about 40% of the consumption of energy. There's industrial power, which is mostly natural gas, which is about 30% of the energy consumed in Canada. And then there's motive fuels, which is about the other 30%. And I'm challenged to see how we're going to get in 11 years to a grid that does away with natural gas and does away with motive fuels, so effectively loads up the 40% of power with an additional 2.5 times or 1.5 times more additional electricity, when we haven't grown electricity barely at all in the last handful of years. Can you please explain how this equation squares at the end of the day?
So I can say that the provinces that manage their markets are actively thinking about how they are going to grow both the generation, transmission, and distribution within their grids. I will reference, although not in detail, studies like the ISO in Ontario, where they did an energy pathways analysis to understand how they would have to grow what sources of electricity and what type of investments they'd need to make in transmission. Quebec, of course, has recently done a study that highlights the figures and the investments required. British Columbia has done one recently as well. So they're very attuned to that. I think if I get the stat right, was it between 1950 and the year 2000, the grid in Canada grew by 3 times over that 50 years. Over the preceding 20 years, there was major investments in decarbonization, and now we're back to expansion. So the utilities and the system operators know how to do this.
So with respect, the grid grew that much, but also did the consumption of every other source of energy grew at the same rate. And now we're talking about displacing those energy sources while the power consumption continues to grow in Canada. So you've got a bit of a riddle here about how you're going to meet that equation of growing energy demand and cutting down on the energy sources, supposedly. Now, I think they're words in the air. I don't think they actually land for people that are actually looking at putting this equation together, with all due respect. But this is a lot of money we're talking about. To follow up on what my colleague, Mr. Angus, said, yes, Alberta has about 35% of its capacity supplied by wind and solar. The cost of that to the consumer in Alberta has been a doubling of their electricity rates over the last decade. In addition, it only provides 7% of the energy in Alberta. So we are still, in Alberta, 93% powered by hydrocarbons. Here's a riddle for you. If we're going to have carbon capture, utilization, and storage at a place like the Shepard plant in Calgary, that's going to require 30% of the plant's power in order to put the carbon underground. Therefore, we're going to have to expand that plant by a function of 30%. Can you tell me how that's going to work as far as filling the grid goes?
I'm happy to jump in on this one. Just generally speaking, I mean, I think it's just an extension of what my colleague said. There is going to have to be a rapid increase in the amount of electricity produced. But one element that hasn't come through is clearly that maybe I could just emphasize is that there's a lot more work to be done on energy efficiency and producing the technologies.
Okay, but you say there has to be a lot more energy produced, a lot more electricity produced. Where in the equation that we have on the table in front of us in Canada is that electricity going to come from? I don't see any sites coming up. Site C is already spoken for. Muskrat Falls is an economic boondoggle, was 28.5 cents per kilowatt hour, grossly subsidized by 2 levels of government. Where are we going? Where is this power going to come from?
Mr. McLean, well, I'll have to stop there because your time is up, but you can continue on that line of questioning on the next opportunity you get. I'm going to go. We'll now move to Mr. McLean for 5 minutes.
Thank you again. Following up on my last question, 2.5 times electricity in Canada within 11 years. Can anybody tell me where that's going to come from?
Sorry, I'll just jump in just quickly. I think you said within 11 years. I think it's more like a 2050 horizon, that statistic. At least that's what I think the Canada Energy Regulator is looking at, it more of a long-term kind of 2 to 3 times demand requirement, and that accords, of course, with population growth, economic growth, and increased consumer demand, as you rightly pointed out, as the member rightly pointed out.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I
so
think
are there any sites being developed now to produce electricity at a large scale?
I think there are several sites under development across jurisdictions.
Tell me one, please.
I think Bruce Nuclear is one of North America's, if not the world's biggest nuclear facility. I think Ontario government has announced plans to increase its capacity.
Interesting, because I spoke with Todd Smith, the Minister of Energy, and he talked about how they're going to have more gas turbine electricity in the midterm because their nuclear is going to take a long time to build. So you've got Darlington, you've got Pickering, and you've got Bruce. The only one of those that is an expansion is Bruce. The others are replacing, to not the same degree of energy produced before, previous electricity generation. So let's call it level as far as the nuclear power that's going to contribute to the grid in Ontario. Tell me how we're going to produce more electricity power in Canada.
Sure. I think the short answer to that question is it's going to have to come from a variety of sources.
Okay,
and
thank
I'm
you.
going to say,
thank
just,
you.
if I could just add,
all I need to say is somebody give me a large project that's going to take 15 years to build, counting the planning, and yet we're nowhere near even having one on the blueprints right now. So let me move on, if I can, please. We talk about the building out of the intertie here between provinces. The intertie build is going up significantly. The interties in the U.S. take 8 years to plan and 3 years to build on average, 11 years just for the interties, and costs about $1.6 billion per 1,000 megawatts, if you will. So we're going to have to spend a lot of money here on any interties. Tell me about the line losses that happen over 1,000 kilometers of electricity distribution, pardon me. Okay, thank you. Anybody?
Yes, 4 to 5%.
4 to 5%.
Length of the line.
Over 1,000 kilometers, or over?
I won't be able to say if 1,000.
My understanding is it's progressive. It's the more distance you travel, the more electricity you use. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Okay, thank you. So 1,000 kilometers. I know from Edmonton to Calgary, it's almost 8%. So tell me how much it's going to be over 1,000 kilometers.
I believe 8 is really the very high end of transmission line losses. It's more like 4 to 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned something, this whole report you referred to, Powering Canada Forward, that clean energy is a competitive advantage. I think affordable energy is a competitive advantage. Clean energy is a nice to have. We look at these things, I think even the Canadian Electricity Association looks at this as a triangle of affordability, reliability, and cleanliness. Call it sustainability. But the most important one of those three angles is, of course, the sustainability. If you don't have a reliable electricity power grid, you don't have anything. So affordability and sustainability are going to have to be your pivot points. Can you tell me how we're going to continue to have a reliable grid if we have continued increasing demand without any plans, or few plans, if you will, for more supply?
I mean, I'm just going to state the obvious. Provincial system operators are actively planning for this. They run the grids in provinces.
Thank you.
And they are actively planning.
I agree. So why is the federal government stepping on their toes with an overreach like the Canadian Energy Regulations? And I suggest that you advise your minister this is a gross overstep that's going to cause great problems for the delivery of power to Canadians that need reliable delivery of electricity to their homes going forward. Thank you.